The UFC has no shortage of shocking judges' decisions, but the situation went from bad to worse in the last few years. 2 weeks ago, we witnessed how the judging system is truly flawed. In the main event, Sandhagen fought Vera and completely dominated the fight in every aspect. But one judge gave the fight to Cheeto, whilst the other 2 judges saw Corey as the clear winner. But at least Corey got the deserved win. Jared Gordon was not so lucky against Paddy Pimblett. This begs a question. How could so-called experts make wrong decisions time after time if the general public is able to recognize the obvious winner? It's impossible to talk about this topic without looking at the actual criteria for judging a mixed martial arts fight. First and foremost, the criteria is divided into 3 main categories, with the most important being effective striking and grappling, followed by effective aggressiveness and cage control. In terms of these categories, judges assess the octagon situation and award a winner if the fight goes the distance. We're going to concentrate on the first category, effective striking and grappling, as it's the primary criteria for every match, while the other 2 categories are a backup and used only when effective striking and grappling are 100% equal for a round. The unified rules give more importance to blows with immediate effect rather than cumulative impact. Basically, the damage is more important than the volume of the strikes. The same principle can be applied to grappling, in which impactful and effective results of fighters' actions are looked at more than their position. Let's say Fighter A is landing damaging shots, and Fighter B is throwing more but less impactful strikes. Fighter A should be given the advantage. And if that same fighter lands a double leg takedown and secures a full guard position, but Fighter B is being more dangerous with elbows and submissions from the bottom, Fighter B should be given the advantage. In the ideal situation, the judges should always choose the right winner based on the rules I previously mentioned. However, that's not always the case, which is understandable since it's hard to follow those rules perfectly in a quick-paced fight, where it's impossible to catch every detail going on at the moment. But still, the judges allow themselves too much subjective freedom. They assess the fight in a way that leaves room for mistakes, and in recent times those mistakes are more frequent and frustrating to fans and even the organization itself. They don't follow the set rules, but instead they judge the fight based on their liking. If one judge is more fond of wrestling, he will value takedowns more than submissions. And if one judge is a big fan of boxing, he will appeal more to pure boxing instead of throwing powerful leg kicks. All of these subjective factors lead to completely different scorecards and unexplainable decisions. So, is this a case of poorly defined judging criteria, incompetence, or is there something else in play? I made a Patreon account since my Israel vs. Alex video got removed from my channel. There will be exclusive content posted there every month, including other perks. So if you can, please check out the link in the description. It would help the channel a lot. Sometimes, a judge's decision is a popularity contest. It seems like the more popular you are to the public, the more advantage you have when it comes to winning a fight on points. Of course, that's not always the case, and there are just a few fighters on the roster who are actually in a position to receive those kinds of benefits, but it has to be said. For example, an already mentioned fight between Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. It's hard to believe Paddy would be given the decision if he wasn't Paddy the Baddie, an internet superstar who is garnering millions of views on social media and who is looked at as the next big thing. He wasn't supposed to lose that fight, and based on the judges' opinions, he didn't. But based on everyone else, he clearly lost.
We both agreed, and then I looked at you like, what the fuck? That didn't make any sense. I thought it was 2-1.
You've also probably heard of the saying to beat the champ. You got to beat him convincingly. Or you can't win a title on a close decision. That shouldn't be the case. If you're a challenger and you're just slightly better than the champ that night, you should get that belt strapped around your waist, no matter what. Unfortunately, people whose opinions matter the most in those situations don't see it that way, which again leads to some bizarre decisions. Personally, I think Georges St-Pierre lost his fight against Johnny Hendricks. But back then, it was more of an issue with the judging system rather than anything else. In those days, you had to completely dominate your opponent, take his wallet, and steal his girl to get a 10-8 round. And George kept it competitive enough in the rounds he lost to just avoid that from happening. Him being the champ could have contributed to the decision, but it's not a clear-cut example. In more recent history, we could look at the fight between Jon Jones and Dominic Reyes. Almost all of the media saw Jones clearly losing the fight, but he won by unanimous decision with even one judge giving him 4 rounds. It seems as though Jones's fame and stature, combined with him being a champion, brought him the win. And whenever there's a title fight that is super close, for some reason it's almost always the champ that gets the nod. As though the judges are saying, it's a close fight, and the winner is not obvious, so we'll leave the title with the current champion just to be safe. This is a problem, but title fights aren't that often compared to all the other lesser-known matches and fighters whose careers are being destroyed by the hands of these judges. Sports and gambling have been correlated since the dawn of time, and influential criminal organizations always looked for a way to influence matches in their favor. Fixing isn't an unknown topic in the fighting world as well. Anything with enough money involved is prone to corruption. People saw boxing as a sport that is even easier to manipulate considering there were only 2 participants involved. And to this day, the sweet science has been clouded by the continuous presence of corruption in the sport. In 1988, on the last day of the Olympic Games in Seoul, Park Si-hun was ready to write his name in the history books by winning the gold medal against a 19-year-old Roy Jones Jr. The fight became infamous in the boxing world, but for all the wrong reasons. Approaching the fight, Jones hadn't lost a single round, while Park Si-hun had his share of good fortune just to get to the final. The fight was supposed to be a routine win for the American, but instead, it became one of the most controversial outcomes for a boxing match ever. Jones continued his perfect form by putting on a boxing clinic for 3 rounds and proved that he was the far superior boxer. It was an utter mismatch, with Jones landing 86 punches compared to Park's 32. Park also received 2 standing 8 counts and 2 warnings from the ref. It's safe to say even Park's most loyal fans didn't believe he had any chance to win by decision, but 3 of 5 judges awarded him the fight. Jones Jr. took off his silver medal and never wore it again. Steadily, corruption made its way to the biggest mixed martial arts organization, the UFC. James Krause is a former UFC welterweight and a coach who has been a vital part of one of the recent sports controversies caused by the suspicious betting activity surrounding a match of one of his fighters. Krause knew that his fighter Derek Minner had a knee injury, but he didn't disclose that information with the organization. Minner lost the fight in the first round via technical knockout because his knee gave out, and there was a large amount of money being put on that exact outcome, which raised suspicion on Krause and his team. Minner was let go by the organization and Krause is currently suspended. This makes us wonder what's really the story behind those shady decisions and the overall management of the organization. Even though James Krause's case isn't directly connected with the bizarre judging decisions, but if a simple coach is in a position to fix fights, why wouldn't judges be influenced in the same way by more powerful and significant people? The UFC doesn't lack its share of absolutely questionable decisions, and maybe it's not a case of pure incompetence from the judges, and it's not a case of the popularity of the fighters involved, and maybe it's not even a case of poorly set rules of the sport, but rather it's something far more complicated in question. And to try and justify those mistakes, it's often mentioned that the fighters shouldn't leave the fight to the judges. I don't agree with that at all. The judges should do their job properly. The fighter's job is to try and win by any means necessary. And if that way is grinding out a decision win, well, sure, it's a legitimate win. They definitely shouldn't have to worry about some people at the desk denying them that right.